Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Hello.
Today we're venturing into a topic you often see in movies. You know, college fraternities and sororities.
Right, depicted with lots of camaraderie, parties, maybe some wild abandon.
Exactly. They're a huge part of university life, especially here in the U.S. They offer community, tradition.
But there's often a darker side, isn't there? Particularly when it comes to joining them.
That's what we're focusing on, that process of becoming a member, the pledging.
Yeah, the pledging period. It's like a probationary phase, and it almost always involves tasks, trials, often hazing rituals.
And hazing, just to be clear, we're talking about activities that humiliate, abuse, or endanger someone trying to join a group.
Right, regardless of whether they say they're willing. And what's really fascinating and tragic is how that intense desire to belong, to be accepted, it can just override common sense. People end up doing incredibly dangerous things.
Yeah, the pull of that community is so strong.
Yeah.
So our mission today is really to show how dire those consequences can be. We're going to unpack 10 really extreme examples of hazing that went horribly wrong.
Cases that ended in serious injury, injustice, even death.
It's pretty sobering stuff. Looking at the hidden dangers in some of these traditions, before we jump into the first case, what are some of the maybe underlying psychological things happening here? Why are people susceptible?
That's a really crucial starting point. A lot of it boils down to that fundamental human need for acceptance. Think about it. You're often a new student, maybe away from home for the first time.
Right, looking for connection.
Exactly. Identity, belonging. And these groups offer that instantly. A ready-made community.
So the desire is powerful.
Incredibly powerful. So powerful that people might endure humiliation, discomfort, even real danger because they see it as the price of admission.
Like questioning the ritual means you're not committed enough.
Precisely. It creates this dynamic where dissent feels almost impossible.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That pressure to conform. Let's start with our first case then. Kenny Leong.
Okay.
He was 19 years old, one of 10 pledges for Lambda Phi Epsilon at UC Irvine. This was back in 2005.
And this particular fraternity, Lambda Phi Epsilon, already had, shall we say, a reputation.
A bad one, yeah. So Kenny and the other pledges, they were forced to play this American football game for 3 hours.
Right, against 40 brothers and alumni. But here's the critical part, is say, this wasn't just a game.
No.
No padding, no helmets, no protection at all.
And they were made to do these just ridiculous physical acts, like jumping up and landing flat on their chest.
Without using their hands to break the fall. Imagine that. Reports say many split their chins open.
But they had to keep going.
They were forced to continue. And the active members, the brothers, apparently got more and more violent, piling into these unprotected pledges with huge force.
So Kenny, exhausted, dehydrated, in pain. He gets tackled hard.
So hard he was knocked unconscious.
And he just lay there on the ground for 10 minutes.
10 minutes before anyone really grasped how serious it was, he started convulsing violently.
His brain had started to swell inside his skull. Just awful.
And even then, before calling an ambulance, the cover-up began.
They forced the other pledges into a vow of silence.
Instructed them to say it was just a friendly game.
Kenny was pronounced brain dead later that week, and, despite other pledges eventually speaking out, one guy, Daniel Day, even said, all Lambda presidents have lawyers. They're prepared for this. No fraternity members ever face criminal charges. None.
And that lack of accountability, sadly, is something you see quite often in these cases.
Why is that? What stops justice, I guess?
It's usually a mix of things. Powerful alumni networks providing legal backing, maybe financial support.
Right.
The difficulty of proving specific intent in a chaotic group situation. Sometimes, perhaps, universities are hesitant to prosecute fully because of the potential damage to their own reputation.
And that vow of silence you mentioned.
It's incredibly effective, unfortunately. It intimidates witnesses, creates this wall that investigators find hard to break down.
Okay, so from that kind of brutal physical trauma, let's shift to another major danger in hazing. Alcohol.
Yeah, perhaps even more insidious in some ways.
Drinking's a big part of college life anyway, but forcing it on pledges, especially younger ones who might not have much experience, it can be lethal.
Absolutely.
This account comes from a woman named Ravital, a Dartmouth graduate from 2009.
Yeah.
She was pledging Kappa Gamma.
Right. So her story is, well, she was woken up in the middle of the night, blindfolded by her future sorority sisters,
Led into a car.
and then forced to chug this extremely strong alcoholic mix from a big water bottle, plus shots of vodka between gulps.
Just forcing it down her.
She drank an unbelievable amount. She said later she was just determined to join, to become part of the sisterhood.
And after they forced her out of the car, her memory just
Stops. Completely blank.
She woke up in the intensive care unit, Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center.
Her blood alcohol content, or BAC, was 0.399.
Which is incredibly high. For context, a 0.4 BAC is considered almost always fatal. Coma, brain death territory.
Yeah, she said herself, I was literally one sip of alcohol away from dying.
And her body was covered in cuts and bruises too, suggesting other things happened after she blacked out that she doesn't even remember.
It just shows how terrifyingly fast these situations escalate. The peer pressure, maybe sleep deprivation, and just the sheer volume of alcohol.
It overwhelms the system.
Quickly, leading straight to alcohol poisoning. And pledges often hide how bad they feel, right? They want to fit in, prove themselves, so they don't speak up, which delays help.
Okay, our next one. This is really unsettling. We're going back quite a way now to 1954, University of Southern California, Kappa Sigma pledges.
And this involved raw liver.
Raw liver, yeah. To become a brother, each pledge had to swallow a quarter-pound piece of raw liver.
Soaked in oil.
And they weren't allowed to chew it. A quarter pound. That's like, what, the size of a club sandwich?
Pretty much. Just swallow it whole.
One pledge. Richard Swanson, he starts to choke on it.
It gets lodged in his throat. He couldn't breathe.
He died 2 hours later in the hospital. But the truly dark part here, I think, is the cover-up attempt.
Yes. The brothers, the Kappa Sigma members, they didn't tell the ambulance crew what had happened. About the meat.
So the paramedics thought he was having, like, a nervous spasm or something.
If they had just confessed, told them what they'd forced him to do, Richard probably would have survived.
What does that say about, I don't know, panic? Or just fear of getting caught overriding basic decency?
It really speaks volumes about that primal fear of consequences, doesn't it? When something goes badly wrong in one of these rituals, the instinct can be self-preservation. Protect the group, protect yourself.
Right.
The fraternity's reputation, individual futures, suddenly seem more important than the truth. And that leads to these awful decisions like hiding crucial information, which turns injury into fatality. The fear just swamps the moral compass.
It's chilling. And it's not just male pledges facing these dangers. Our next case shows women can be pushed to the same extremes.
Absolutely. This involves the Alpha Kappa Alpha chapter at CL State. It's actually one of the most respected black sororities in the U.S.
Right, so after a week of already intense hazing, 2 pledges. Kristen High, who was 22, and Kina Saphir, 24.
They were taken down to Dockweiler State Beach, forced to do hours of exercises.
And then, even though Kina couldn't swim,
Didn't know how to swim at all.
they were both told to walk backwards into the ocean. Just walk backwards into the waves.
Determined to be accepted after everything they'd already been through, they did it, they obeyed.
But the ocean that night was rougher than usual. A wave hit Kina, dragged her further out.
And Kristen, knowing Kina couldn't swim, heroically tried to save her, swam out after her.
But the currents were too strong. They pulled both women under.
Neither of them surfaced again. Their bodies were recovered later.
It's just hard to grasp the desperation they must have felt. To follow an order like that, knowing the risk, especially for Kina.
It really is that desire for belonging we talked about. It becomes so tragic here. They'd endured a week of hazing already. They were probably exhausted, psychologically worn down.
Primed to obey.
Yeah. The commitment to the sorority, seeing the finish line of initiation, it just overshadowed basic self-preservation. It shows how these rituals can just suppress rational thought.
Okay, number 5 takes us to Louisiana State University, LSU, in 1979. And this one seems, well, obviously dangerous from the start.
You could say that. Members of the Theta Psi fraternity blindfolded a group of pledges.
And forced them to walk down a highway, blindfolded.
Guided only by the voices of the frat brothers shouting directions.
It just begs the question, what were they thinking? The judgment involved in orchestrating that.
Putting lives at such immediate, clear risk.
And predictably, tragically, a car that didn't see the group in time crashed right into them. 5 pledges were hit.
3 suffered broken legs. But one pledge, Bruce Wiseman, he was killed instantly.
It's almost unbelievable that anyone would think that was an acceptable initiation activity. What drives that kind of recklessness?
You know, it often seems to come from this really distorted idea of a rite of passage. Like, the more dangerous or humiliating it is, the stronger the bond or the more worthy the pledge becomes.
Right.
Combine that with alcohol, which is often involved, peer pressure among the older members themselves to uphold or escalate traditions, and just a severe lack of foresight.
Yeah.
And you get these catastrophic choices. The immediate fun or the tradition just completely eclipses any thought of the real potential harm.
Okay, let's move to 2001, University of Miami. Chad Meredith, 18 years old.
A Kappa Sigma pledge, apparently a very charismatic young man the fraternity was eager to have.
On November 5th that year, classes were canceled. Hurricane warning. So, cause for celebration, right?
Back at the frat house, drinking ensues, brothers, pledges. And one brother, Travis Montgomery, who was actually Chad's friend, suggests a rite of passage.
Which was?
Swimming across Lake Osceola. Travis claimed he'd done it before.
Okay, so Chad, drunk, wanting to prove himself, he agrees.
In the middle of the night, strips down to his underwear and starts swimming. It's 437 feet across this freezing cold lake. 2 older fraternity members went with him.
But Chad only makes it about halfway. He starts struggling, calling for help.
His 2 companions, the older members, they kept swimming to the other side. Apparently, each assumed the other one was helping Chad.
Oh no. So he was left alone.
Effectively, yes. Intoxicated, exhausted. He struggled as much as he could, but just couldn't make it.
He surrendered to the lake. Disappeared. Only 34 feet from the shore.
When they recovered his body, his BAC was .43.
And the aftermath here is, well, notable. His family sued.
And they were awarded $14 million in compensation, paid out by Kappa Sigma's insurance policy.
Which apparently is the largest amount ever awarded for a fraternity hazing death.
Yeah.
What does a figure like that signal?
Well, beyond the human tragedy, it screams financial liability, doesn't it? It's a huge cost. While money can never replace a life, settlements that large send a very clear message.
That there are serious consequences.
Serious liabilities. These cases often expose failures and oversight, not just by the individuals, but potentially by the national organizations too. Maybe they weren't doing enough to prevent these things, to regulate their chapters.
Right.
It forces insurance companies, national fraternities, everyone involved to really reevaluate their policies, their enforcement. The risk becomes too high financially.
Okay, this next case takes us outside the typical frat system. We're talking about a marching band.
Right. Florida A&M University, Robert Champion. He was a skilled musician, a drum major, and he wanted to become the band leader.
So to even be considered for leadership?
He had to go through an initiation ritual, just like all the previous band leaders had. It had a name, Crossing Bus C.
Crossing Bus C. What did that involve?
He had to walk from the front to the back of a park bus. Simple enough, right? Except, while he walked, he was punched, kicked, hit with various objects by other band members lining the aisle.
And a marching band. That seems unexpected.
Strange, maybe, but it was a deeply ingrained band tradition. And Robert apparently decided the pain would be worth the reward of leadership.
But as he was walking down that aisle, pushing through the others, he clearly didn't anticipate just how violent it would be.
The beating was incredibly severe. He collapsed before he even reached the back of the bus.
And he died.
Died as a result of soft tissue bleeding caused by the blunt force trauma.
His family received $1.1 million and an apology from the university. The band was suspended for over a year. It really makes you question tradition, doesn't it, when it normalizes that kind of brutality?
It absolutely does. Tradition can be such a powerful, sometimes blinding force. It creates this echo chamber where dangerous things keep happening just because it's always been done this way.
Yeah.
It fosters secrecy, loyalty, makes it hard for anyone to speak out or for the group to change course. And in this case, the drive for leadership in a disciplined group like a band created similar pressures to what you see in frats.
Okay, next up, another chilling one from 1979. Monmouth College in New Jersey. Zeta Beta Tau fraternity. 5 pledges involved.
They were taken to a sandy beach on the Atlantic coast and made to dig graves.
Symbolic graves, supposedly.
Yep.
Each 6 feet deep.
Then they were told to lie down in these holes, and the frat brothers started covering them with sand, effectively burying them.
The line between symbolic and real danger seems incredibly thin there.
Perilously thin. And things went wrong very quickly.
The grave, the hole, that one pledge William E. Flowers was lying in, it collapsed.
Buried him completely. He inhaled heaps of sand. His oxygen was cut off.
The other frat members tried to dig him out.
But they couldn't get to him in time. William died of asphyxiation.
That idea of a symbolic act turning so horrifyingly real, it's just gut-wrenching.
It's such a stark reminder, isn't it? Even rituals that seem symbolic, or maybe just meant to scare someone, they can have deadly results if you don't account for the environment. for human error, for just basic physics sometimes. That line between a scare and a catastrophe is razor thin. It needs constant risk assessment.
Our second to last story involves an unsanctioned group, Men of Honor, an underground fraternity at Virginia State University.
Right, so not officially recognized by the university.
As part of their initiation, 7 pledges were made to link arms and try to cross the Appomattox River together without breaking the chain.
And here's the critical oversight, the failure in planning. The members organizing it hadn't realized how much the river had swollen.
Since the last time they did this ritual.
Exactly. The current was also far stronger than usual. It didn't take long at all before the current just swept the linked pledges downstream.
5 of them were rescued quickly by the other members on the bank.
But 2 pledges, Marvel Edmondson and Human Holmes, they weren't so lucky, swept out of sight.
Their bodies were found 2 days later at the bottom of the river.
And in this case, there were legal consequences. 4 members of this unsanctioned group were found guilty.
Involuntary manslaughter and hazing charges. Sentences from 5 to 14 months in prison.
It highlights that clear legal consequence and perhaps underscores the added danger of these underground, unsanctioned groups.
Less oversight.
Precisely. Without the structure, the rules, the potential scrutiny of a university or a national organization, these groups can operate with even less accountability, potentially taking even greater risks. They hide in plain sight, making it hard to intervene until tragedy occurs.
And the convictions show that even if you call it tradition, you're still legally responsible for the harm caused.
Exactly. Consent, or perceived consent, is not a defense against criminal negligence.
Okay, finally. We have an incident that's not college-based, but it involves initiation into a fraternity of sorts, the Freemasons.
A notoriously secretive society. This story offers a pretty morbid glimpse into their activities, or at least the activities of one particular lodge.
So William James was undergoing an initiation. He was told that to become an official member.
He had to sit perfectly still in a chair, while a senior member shot tin cans placed around his head.
Sounds terrifying. But there was a secret.
Yeah, apparently all the other members knew the gun was loaded with blanks, and other members off to the side were supposed to knock the cans down, creating the illusion of marksmanship.
Okay, a prank, essentially. But here's where it goes catastrophically wrong.
Terribly wrong. The shooter, who was 76 years old, he mistakenly pulled the wrong gun from his pocket.
He had 2 guns.
Apparently. He was known to carry a licensed firearm, a real one. He was an elderly World War II veteran, and in the moment, he got confused.
Oh my God.
He pulled out the real gun, loaded with actual bullets, fired at William James.
Hit him square in the face, killed him instantly.
Just instantaneous tragedy from a supposed prank.
And afterwards, connecting this to the bigger picture, the main Freemason leaders denied this specific lodge was even officially tied to their organization.
Right. They stated their official rituals never involve weapons, which raises that question again about accountability in secretive, maybe decentralized organizations.
How do you regulate that?
It's incredibly challenging. While the man body might disavow such actions, the autonomy of individual lodges can create pockets where dangerous practices, or just terrible errors like this one, can happen.
And denying affiliation is a way to distance from liability.
It often is, leaving the victim's family seeking justice from an entity that claims no responsibility.
So these 10 examples, they paint a really stark picture, don't they? The desire to belong mixed with unchecked power, reckless decisions.
Leading to just devastating outcomes. We've seen patterns, extreme physical abuse, psychological torment, tragic accidents.
And disturbingly often those attempts to cover things up, and a real lack of criminal consequences sometimes.
Yeah, what stands out is how often warning signs seem to be missed or just ignored, how easily common sense gets overridden by wanting acceptance, and just how thin that line is between a tradition and a tragedy.
The responsibility seems huge, not just for the individuals, but for the institutions overseeing these groups.
Or failing to oversee them adequately, perhaps.
What stands out to you listening to these stories? It's genuinely chilling. A look at dangers lurking beneath the surface of something many people only see as parties and friendship.
It really is.
This deep dive, I hope, has shed some light on some horrifying facts, really. We hope it's given you a more informed perspective. Maybe encourages you to think about group dynamics, initiation rituals, not just in college, but anywhere that desire to belong exists. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the shadows of initiation. We definitely encourage you to share your thoughts, keep exploring the world around you.